Today, I am joined by Anna Stretchin. Anna, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
How expensive is it living in Los Angeles right now?
Very expensive. I think it's one of the most expensive cities in the country. But I lucked out because I've been here for a long time. I'm not going to say how long. So I got a nice, comfortable rent. But it's if I wanted to move, it'd be a nightmare, money wise.
So you went ahead and you've started your own accessibility business, and that is why I wanted to bring you on so that a lot of people that watch my channel are accessibility professionals, and I think some of them are considering the idea of maybe not so much starting a formal business, but at least starting to do contract work on the side. So, can you first get into your business? Like, what are you doing? What are you offering for accessibility?
That is something that I've been working on for quite a while, and I've been distilling it. Um, I started off just doing development because that's what my experience is in remediation. But now I'm also focusing on audits. So I have a couple audits going right now. I'm going to be using your fabulous accessibility tracker for that. I keep promising I'm going to get in there, but I am. Um, and I think that the reason I'm doing that too is because I love the attention to detail. I really love that. And also, I can fix those issues. So if I send someone an audit and they're like, oh my God, I can actually offer my services, support, and what I think I'm uniquely qualified in is helping the developers, mentor them, or do the work myself. That's pretty much it.
And so you specialize in development, which is somewhat rare because you don't see a lot of I don't come across many people who specialize in remediation. It's usually the other way around. It's usually that the audit that they offer. And so now you're offering both services because is this because it's just why wouldn't you offer the audit if you can already remediate? And so it's like, well, just come to me for everything.
Yeah, I mean, um, I'm not anywhere near where you're at, not even trying to be. I'm just taking a teeny weeny little slice of that. And I think that having a package, so I can fix it, I can talk about it, I can help you find a developer. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to develop it. Um, but I find that people are really lost in some of these areas. This happened also back in the day with domains. People would buy a domain, they would have a developer work on it, and then, they didn't know what their passwords were, they didn't know who was the registrar. They don't know anything, but they don't necessarily have to, but they're depending on you. And that is just an extension. I'm going to be handling things that they probably don't know much about, and I want to instill that trust. And I think me developing too after a an audit is a good idea.
So we had a client, this was very recently, and he asked me to basically a lot of times it's just as simple as, hey, can you make my website ADA compliant? And so I asked him, I was like, well, we would start with an audit, and then I was like, but we need to be able to remediate. And so I started to ask him, do you have access to he was using WordPress, so do you have access to this? No. Do you have access to your host? No. Do you have access to your FTP? No. Do you even have access to your domain? No. We had to build an entirely new site because there was simply no access to anything. So that was somewhat surprising. But yeah, I mean, a lot of clients too, like you said, it's like once you get started, once you get into it, they need help with more and more. It's not just one thing. Sometimes for some clients it is. Sometimes they know exactly what they want, and other times it's, oh, okay, like I can see. And I think what helps is when sometimes clients think I'm trying to upsell them on things when I'm really just trying to tell them if you're doing this, you would probably want to do this as well. Do you find that to be the case?
Yes, because I try to educate without preaching. And I think what I have found, and this is just in all my experience since I've been doing it since 2019, developing, I mean, not developing, but developing with accessibility in mind, is that people, and I was one of these people, you find that something needs to be fixed and you're only focusing on that. But actually, even if you make it accessible in terms of semantic HTML and all the things that need to go into that, it's not actually very usable. it's not actually a good idea. That translates into WordPress and Shopify. They're using apps or plugins, and they're using things that are just really poorly coded, bad, poorly structured. So, that would be the place where I would say, no, let's do something a little bit different. Like instead of the carousel, let's think of something else, another design pattern. And I don't think you'd be surprised at how much crap there is out there, but I've seen carousels and then there's multiple buttons and you click on a button and then it launches a gigantic full page window gallery with 50 images and multiple pages and you're just lost. And I'm like, that's a bad design. So in that case, I would be like, maybe don't do that. Let's maybe think about recoding this or restructuring it. I think that's pretty much what you're asking, and that's what I would do.
How long have you been developing? What is your development and background?
I started in the early 2000s. That's a long time. And and then back then it was called web designer. I wasn't really a designer, but I did design things. And then it just morphed into web development. And I've been working ever since.
The early 2000s, late 90s internet was something entirely different than what it is now. I wish I could be in that era once again because I didn't appreciate it enough, right? This was something so transformational. It's taking place right when like I'm still, in my I'm still a teenager at the time where I'm starting to realize the internet, which was about really close to when it hit mainstream. So now what I like to do, and there aren't many of these, but I like to watch movies where the early internet is involved just because it's so different and I can't describe, I don't know, it was like very advanced, but looking back, it was also very primitive at the same time. But you got started right in that time.
Just after it, because I knew it was a thing that actually was going to blow up. I had a feeling. And I also did some research. A lot of people were asking about that. Companies were like, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And I remember seeing very horrible things like red text on gray backgrounds and, galaxies in the background and text. And people thought that was really cool. But like, I mean, I didn't know anything about accessibility, but I knew that that was bad. I can't even see it.
The design was so different back then. Even on mainstream websites, if you go back, if anybody hasn't even just seen it in a while, or you haven't, if you don't remember that time, like everything was so much different, like so much more basic, a lot less functionality. But it was really cool. Like it was a really cool moment in time. Were you, so I know you like domain names. Were you buying domain names early too?
Not at that time, but I did start buying them because I thought they were cool. They were not really that cool. Um, and I know when I met with you, I think it was late last year or mid last year, I was looking for domains for my own business and I just can't, there's so many good ones that were available. I just couldn't figure it out. You helped me focus on one, but I bought most of them. And I do keep them. I haven't sold any domains, if that's what you mean, but I do like to have domains. Don't know exactly why. Do you know why?
Oh,
You?
I know why. I have over 1,000.
Oh, cool. I don't feel so bad. I feel
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I've been buying for a while. I was like the first domain I ever bought was newproblem.com. And it was like, I don't know why, but that was what I think I had an idea in my mind, but the more I started, the more I realized I was like, these are very valuable, but what's difficult is waiting on that value to realize and holding on to them that long. And sometimes it's really quick, but a lot of times it's not that you don't it's not as sensational as like, oh, I'm going to buy this domain name and I'll flip it in 4 months. I've
yeah.
held domains for over 10 years. I have a lot of good ones now, but at the time, it was like they were widely available, but it wasn't like you had like just people weren't realizing the value back at that time. And that's something that I didn't quite realize is that
Yeah.
the value wasn't going to catch up for a while. But every now and then, so I don't even try to sell the domains. I have them listed and they're really, really high. But every now and then, like just 2 weeks ago, I sold one for 5,000 or
What?
5,500, but they it's just yeah, I've had dropped a lot of good ones too. But that was part of the early internet was getting some of these domain names. But I know, so I know you bought fractionalaccessibility.com, which is
I
now
did.
one of your websites. And I know you have ADA compliant developer.com. Yeah, and sometimes if you just wait, like some of these will either drop, like even good ones will still drop and become available now. But yeah, I love domain names too. Like you can see like my training is on adacompliance.net. I bought accessibilitytraining.com. That one was expensive. I had to pay up for that.
Wow.
Accessible was expensive too. But
Yeah, you have the accessible.org, right?
yeah.
Wow. I mean, every time I go there, I forget that it's yours, but then I'm like, wow, he lucked out. Like
Oh,
that's
that
just
wasn't luck.
I mean, you were still able to get it. Um, Especially now since accessibility is just, phew, at least
Well,
awareness.
so I started looking at it in 2017. I started actually moving in 2018. And the accessible.org went to an aftermarket auction.
Mhm.
And I noticed it. I think I remember noticing it. I don't remember the exact story, but it was $300 on the auction. Oh no, I missed the auction. I look back 3 months after I looked into, I was like, this would be the domain. Like, this is the one I want. It was available on an aftermarket for $300. If I had looked sooner, which I was aware, if I had looked sooner, I could have got accessible.org for much less. But I paid, when you say I got lucky, I temper that because the reseller definitely made a profit off of me and selling that back to me. But I was able to get it. So
Well,
uh,
$300 though, I mean, wouldn't that be worth a lot more now? I think so.
I
But
think
I'm not a
access
pro.
I think accessible would be worth at least, in the like somewhat lower to mid five figures just by itself. Like if
Yeah.
you were just to buy the domain name. So yeah, it's fairly valuable. .orgs have increased in value. .orgs weren't always looked at so favorably. It was more for like if you were a nonprofit type
Yeah.
organization, but it fits well within accessibility. But domain names, this is not even a domain name podcast.
Right. Oh my God, we're taking a left turn here.
So for you, why accessibility? Why the niche that you've chosen for your business? Why the services that you're offering?
Well, I mean, I love solving problems. That's number one. That's why I became a developer. I really loved it. And being a developer too, I would be in a little dark room and just slouched and coding, and I really loved that. But I also loved talking to people and explaining things that I'm doing. Um, and I think when I started learning about accessibility, which actually really scared me at first, because I was like under time, deadline, budget deadlines. I was the lead. None of us knew what we were doing, and we had to learn it fast. But that experience helped me to go, wow, I really actually know something different. And it could be valuable skill. So, uh, fast forward to today, I think that the reason that I'm pivoting from just being doing remediation, although that's really exciting too, is accessibility in general is just I think there's a level of creativity in solving the problem. So, for example, um, I know how to make a component accessible, even if it's a super crappy component, but sometimes you have to, actually, that's not true. Sometimes, like I said earlier, you have to just trash that component and do something else. Completely different pattern. But what I really liked about it is that it's not always just about the code. Like I said, you have to maybe think out of the box. And so when I have to think like, okay, they can't do anything about this, they really need it because the stakeholders require it, let's say. So it's not just coding for them and fixing it maybe, but it's also the explanation of why that might not be the best solution, of what could be a better solution. It's helping people. So I guess in short, it's the reason I chose accessibility is because I'm helping people make a more inclusive web, number one, most important thing. Number two, I'm also helping people by educating them a little bit about that. What are the pitfalls? And I offer mentorship to the developers, and it's very rewarding. I like talking about it. There's a lot that I don't know. But that's really exciting because there's so many things happening. I mean, one of the reasons I took your courses, which by the way, I'm not trying to plug you, but I did take your courses. I already knew how to code, but I was only looking at it from a developer perspective. And in order to speak on it better than I had already been speaking on it, I needed to understand some things that were like gaps. And and so learning from those courses really, really helped too. So it's exciting because you're always learning. I think it's better than just straight developer.
Well, I appreciate that. And with the ADA compliance course, I think uh what's really important is that it looks at it specifically from what exactly are the plaintiff's lawyers looking for, because it's not a one-to-one with the success criteria. It's they're looking for very specific things that come up over and over again. And this course, I think, reframes you in this is exactly what you want to look for. This is exactly what to pay attention to. Yes, there's overlap with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but this is not the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And then you get into the example. So for developers who, and I've had this happen, like people that have taken the course, they're looking at it, it's a risk point of view. It's not specifically about coding, it's not specifically about accessibility, it's about risk in accessibility with the ongoing litigation in the United States. So I do think it's helpful to look at it in a different way, even if it overlaps with other subjects. Right now, when you're working with clients, do you like what is the opportunity that you see? Do you have business ideas when you're talking to different people and you're working on uh, their websites or other digital assets, or you're talking to developers? Are there business ideas that you're getting? And you don't have to state what they are, but just like, do you see more in front of you right now where you're like, there's a lot to do?
Business ideas as in like, wow, we could explore that and be expand on.
Business business ideas as in I'm working on this today with this developer, but as far as like what I offer to clients or what clients may need that isn't currently being served in the marketplace, do you have anything that comes to mind?
I mean, I have a few things. There is a very popular. I haven't fully explored this yet. It's a very popular form plugin for WordPress, and a current client is using that. And my colleague, who's a backend developer, we are saying this used to be accessible. Maybe that I don't. I mean, it seemed like there was some effort, but maybe we can develop something to help that plugin really expand in that area. I've talked about that. I think I think the other thing, and this might be a little confusing to explain, so bear with me, but something that I noticed, and I'm still possibly noticing it now, I think I am, is when I would work on audits, especially from these very large companies, enterprise level, the audits themselves, and they're paying a lot of money for these audits and they're paying a lot of money for the support hours. The audits were sometimes didn't seem to be checked by a human being. And the reason I say that is because I would go line by line before any audit, any work on it would start with the project manager, and I would say, wow, this is totally wrong. Look, proof. This is not a problem here. And we would tell them and then they would remove it. And then there would be other issues where it's very vague. Okay, so the WCAG violation is not a vague thing, but where it is, what you're focused on, the screenshot, and developers didn't know what to do. And if you're not a person that's experienced to ask the questions, then you could be taken. I mean, I think you could be paying more and more for just the support to help you understand to get to step one. And I think there's a hole in the market for that, for especially developers, because if they're working at a company, well, maybe, I mean, if you are working at a company, but if you want to be a freelancer, for audits that you get, a company may get, and they are needing developers to work on this or lead other developers, and that's what I want to do, and that's what I've been trying to do. That person who has that experience in looking at an audit and really looking, I mean, examining it, they can actually help that company save money. I think so because you're saving time and because you're not, what is that expression? I think it's, I mean, I speak English fluently, but sometimes I forget, like um, spinning your wheels. You're just spinning and spinning and spinning. And so to me, I don't know if that's a business idea, but it is something that I'm focused on is helping people understand the audits that they have been given. That's a pretty big deal. And also, some of those audits are not audits at all. They're scans. and they're god awful scans. Awful. And I don't know if these are business ideas, but I mean, for sure, I've had to help a client who had a scan, and their legal department, who was, steps away from this, said, "Well, we need to have 100%, and we're contracted to do blah blah blah." I don't even want to get into all the details. And that scan was horrible. It was pulling out legacy code that wasn't even on the site. It was saying that there were all these violations, and they insisted that they must get 100% because it was some legal thing in their company. That's where I start to really talk to whoever I'm talking to, trying to educate them, trying to say, please tell us to your client, this is not a possibility. You cannot have 100%. You cannot rely on a scan. This is not even looking at any issues that I've already seen that are horrendous on the site. It's not fixing anything. And there are a lot of violations that don't even exist. So what is that as far as a business idea? More about how to educate the potential client, how to protect them, how to say that I'm on your side. Let me take a look at this. I'll let you know if this is actually worth even going further with them. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, you gave me that's actually multiple ideas. But one, was this a scan or was this an audit?
So I was initially speaking about audits, but then I got a scan. It was for a different company and a different client, a
Okay.
smaller. The audits were referring to when I worked at the enterprise, at the ad agency.
I don't know if this is what you were talking about, but you reminded me of something where I was talking to John Allen about PDF accessibility, and this was last week, but and I'll link to that video in the description. But I was talking to him about with PDF remediation, it's helpful to even hire an independent consultant, somewhat like a home inspector, to actually inspect the quality of the deliverables. Based on what you said, that was one thought I had was like, hey, we're getting this audit, and this would be especially applicable if you were getting multiple audits. Can you look at the audit and tell me how good it is? Because this is something that does not get talked about, but it happens. The quality of the audit is very much variable depending on who you get the audit through.
Oh yeah.
And and so wait, you want to add to that?
Oh no, do you want me to add to that? No, I want to hear what you have to say. Yeah.
Well, and so what happens is clients oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes they look at these different services as commodities. If I go to here for an audit, it's going to be the same as if I go to here to another company for an audit. But that's not the case because we can go to two different companies and it's not necessarily about how much you pay. It's about how much the company actually invests in the audit and how much they care about the quality of the audit. And if you go and you get the wrong audit, you'll be working from a skewed outlook on your accessibility. Similar to the fact that scans are very limited, you'll have an audit which is, in theory, going to identify all of the accessibility issues. But if you go to the wrong company, in reality, it will not. And so that's why when you said that, it made me think, okay, yeah, people are looking at these as all the same, which they're not. They're different levels of quality, and or I forgot my thought, but and or I don't know. Pick up from there because I forgot what I was saying. But
I forget my thoughts all the time. I think I'm getting older. Uh, I think that the audit itself could use like you say, an external party. It's also an unbiased or non-biased perspective. I mean, maybe not totally not biased because you might say this audit is shit, but yeah, no, I think that's actually a really good step. If you do get an audit from a company, perhaps getting another person, another party that you can trust to take a look to help the pro. So for this is for large companies. So when there's a project manager and they set the whole project up, you've got somebody who's looking at the audit, who's putting together, the schedule for the sprint and assigning the developers and that kind of thing. And so you're going through everything. But at that point, before you even talk to the developers, unless that developer knows, you should bring that other person on, I think, just as a way to double check. I'm I was surprised at how many mistakes were made. And I'm not saying that they have a terrible product or that these companies do, but I just don't think that they're looking at it with a human eye. I just don't, I can say for sure that they weren't looking at it with a human eye at that time. And I've had multiple audits. I think I've looked at four from large companies. So, and worked on them, remediated. But many times I had to send it back. So on a smaller scale, yeah, if somebody's getting an audit and they think it's so great and they paid for it, they don't know what they're doing. I think if they want it before taking the next step and paying a lot of money, having that intermediary step of like, say, you looking at it and going, you know what, it's lacking, that's a really good idea, I think. It's I don't know what you would call that, but just a protection in a way.
Well, it's like an independent auditor of the audits. And
Yeah.
especially if you're going to a company, especially like some clients, they have, double digits of assets that they're looking to work on. And if it's that large, even if you want to go with a particular company, then it's worth hiring someone to it's insurance. Think of it as insurance. If I'm investing $100,000 into accessibility audits, which is not unheard of, right? Because some people just have that many, a lot of these larger organizations, they have a lot of websites, a lot of apps. If you're investing that much, it's worth having someone who's independent, who's looking out for you, even if they're not providing the full service. So you'd be someone who's perfect for that because it's like, okay, we have a contractor and they're going to make sure that this project it goes the right way. And if not, if early on, if something's off, then we need to stop. And so that's also why I recommend starting small with a lot of projects, especially if you're unfamiliar with who you're working with. A prime example would be PDF remediation. Let's not go for 5,000 documents. Let's start at 50 and see how these 50 goes, judge the quality and go from there. But the quality is so important. And I know what's happening. Tell me if I'm wrong. What's happening is there are clients out there who are getting C, D, B minus, and maybe even higher. Maybe some clients get A's, A pluses, but there are some clients who are thinking they're getting A level quality and they're really getting B minus, lower, and it's affecting their accessibility status, which may not come back to them any formal way, but it might, right? That risk exposure is there.
Yeah, I just think it's terrible that people will advertise themselves as being their partner, in helping out with this, and they're not really doing everything to help them. And the biggest thing is that a client doesn't know what they don't know. And so, again, that goes back to the whole domain conversation. People don't know sometimes the technical things that go on. And what I've seen is, and I'm not knocking people trying to make more money and upsell, is that let's say that you have eaten up all your hours by, sending tests back and forth that have failed and because you never really fully understood how it needed to be fixed. Then there's like, well, we've got another level of support, or you can buy this tool. And I had to push back a lot on them. Like, we don't need that tool. It's overkill. I'm just telling you that these things need to be explained or whatever. Um, I was thinking what you were saying though, if somebody, I think actually to help that client also scope. So if they've gotten a contract with, or are about to get a contract with one of the big ones, maybe bringing in someone else in to look at the site and scope what needs to be done. So like the headers, the footers, just take a look, because if you leave it up to them, I don't know. I'm not saying that they're totally trustworthy, but I think it's better I just think it's better for them to get someone who has an experience with that and who has their interests in mind and not the other people.
I've thought about This is something I've never really entertained, but I've always just thought about the idea of if I was in on some of these sales calls where they have the demo, a lot of times they won't give you a price, or you really won't be able to find out much about what you're getting until you're on that demo. And I think to myself about the idea of if the client brought me on the sales call, which a lot of times the salespeople, they don't really understand what they're selling anyway. And
Right.
and so it's they're telling the client what to think and like how everything works. They don't know themselves how it works. But then the products and services aren't helping the client anyway. They're not what the client needs. And I just think to myself, if I was on those calls, like it would just be it'd be funny to just dissect what is being sold because so often it is of low value. It is not what the client needs. It is what the company wants to sell rather than what actually furthers the client's objectives. Um, you made me partner. You made me laugh when you said partner. And the reason why it's that partner is a term that is very
Yeah.
often used with accessibility services. And I get it, right? Like you wanted to make it seem like you're working with someone rather than there's an provider client customer relationship. But the reality is we're not partners, right? Like if you were contracting with me, we'd be partners because we'd be partnering together. A client and myself are not partners. We're not partners. I'm a service provider and the client is receiving the service. So that's not a partnership. That's a consumer transaction. But I've always thought it funny because people so often say partners and it's not really a partnership. I get it, but it's something that's always struck a chord with me. Like it's always like it's like a like someone like I don't know, it's like a tune or a musical note that's off and it like keeps I keep hearing that note.
Like a fly, you know.
I don't know. It's like think of like a piano key that's like the wrong piano key. And like
Yeah.
every time I hear like we're partnering with you, I'm like, but you're not, it's not really a partnership, is it? Like tell me how. All right, so looking at the topics here, did you want to add anything to that, by the way?
Yeah, I do. I want to say that I've been on those sales calls too. They would bring me on. So I've actually done more than just the remediation part in these large companies. They would bring me on with another colleague to talk to, we're interviewing different partners, potential partners. Um, the question I remember asking every single time because of my horrendous experience, well, I wouldn't say it's horrendous. I am exaggerating, but not so great experience is what's your support like? Do you offer support? They're like, yeah, yeah, we absolutely offer support. But then when it came down to it, that was not support as far as I'm concerned. That's what I was referring to before. If the developer doesn't know how to fix this, if it takes forever to get an actual developer to tell you how to fix it, or if you don't know, if you're burning hours actually going back and forth, those are support hours that are being burned when you're testing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things that were in in the audit. And so now you're down to from 20 to 5. Uh, you know, that to me is not support. And they were not clear. When I was talking about support, I specifically said, as a developer, I found that sometimes things are unclear and I need to ask you questions because I'm looking, what is it that you're exactly pointing to? Because this looks good to me. And so that's not the kind of support, even though they would say, yeah, no. I hope I don't get, chased out of town for that, but it's the truth. It's my experience from a developer.
Well, this is so I talk about this as well as the details, right? The details are important. And whenever a company is glossing over the details, that is a red flag. Like we want to make sure that we're aligned on everything. And what happens in accessibility is that the details will be glossed over. Oh, don't worry, everything's included. Or, we've got tools, we've got a suite of tools, and then the suite of tools is basically just a scan. And, it's like everything is marketed and promoted as such as this amazing collection of products and services, and it's actually not. And so it's so important for clients to actually understand what they're getting and what all too often happens is they are learning about accessibility. They're going to these companies. These companies have such lofty, maybe lofty logos or testimonials or reputation. But it's like, but when you get down to the actual service, when you get to the products, how does that help you with your objective, which is almost always conformance with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? How are they going to do it? And like you said, with support, okay, you're telling me there's support, but like, how is there, like, what kind of
Yeah.
support is there? Is it like you're going to email me back and you're going to tell me, I understand that you have a problem and we'll look into it? Like, what kind of support is this?
Right. And you're paying a lot of money. That's a gap that I think people who understand how to work. in like remediate or speak on these things, or like you were talking about a little bit earlier, is to be in on the calls, looking at an audit. That's where I think that's actually a really good opportunity for people. That's where we could really help. That's just another area.
Definitely. So speaking of you and your business, what is the most difficult aspect of being an entrepreneur and operating your own business? What have you found the most difficult and or other parts that are just that create friction for you?
Well, I mean, having to do the admin and if there's marketing, I'm not really I don't really not a seller type of person. So you do have to promote yourself. Um there's friction with that. And I'm also not somebody who's online and social media, so I have to consider these things. Um there's that difficulty. I think one thing that I've been I've been thinking about is, let's say that you have a landing page that was created by a marketer using a marketing, one of these companies that do that marketing. If you're promoting accessibility and yet the landing page is not accessible, things like that, that's something that concerns me. Um, but I think basically it's the marketing part of it. I think when you've got the momentum of word of mouth, that's going to be great. You probably have that already, and I think you probably get a lot of new people. But that's going to be the biggest issue for me.
The marketing is such a big part of this, right? Because there are so many people, professionals who are excellent at what they do, but it's we see right the primary companies that are dominating the marketing, and it's for a lot of people it's difficult to find that business unless they can get it elsewhere. So unless they can get it through contacts, referrals, like agencies, like there are ways to get the work outside of the traditional marketing channels. But it is something where that I can see as the main pain point. But the opportunity, the clients that need you, they're out there. So it's like once you find your way in, then that opens up so much more. For myself, like building up accessible, this has been years, like literally years, where I've been working on content marketing, playing the long game because I'm horrible with people. Like I mean, I say horrible in the sense that I don't network. I don't really like the only reason I promote myself as much as I do is because if I don't, then nobody will pay attention. Like it doesn't matter. Like initially, yes, excellent quality of products and services, that matters. Expertise, experience, skill, that matters. But if you don't tell people that it's there, they will not they don't end up being clients. So you have to make sure that everybody knows I'm open for business. This is what I do. It is entirely excellent. It's not something that I'd like to do, but it's just that's how it works. Like if you don't promote yourself, then people don't end up ordering from you.
Yeah, and I think what I've realized is that people don't always know what the word accessible means. You have to think of a different, I mean, not you, but I had to think of a different way of talking about it to make it accessible, to use no pun intended. But um, I think too that we are up against people who are selling as affiliates to uh, these god awful overlays. Hate those things. And it's a lack of education and a false sense of security that you're given. And especially, and I have seen this personally, someone who sued a couple times already, and they have a little widget for an overlay. But the structure of their site, even if it did work, the structure of the site needs a lot of work. It doesn't do anything to the structure. You know what I mean? The foundational
Mhm,
elements.
mhm.
And I just advise them like, look, this actually is not going to keep you safe. I don't know who told you that it would. I think it's better to, fix some of the foundation and let me know when you're ready. I happen to know a person who knows them, so it was a personal reference, but it worries me a little bit. I mean, I think that's why I like accessibility too, because there's so much misinformation out there. And I will say, sorry, fellow developers, but a lot of developers out there will say that they know how to do this and they do not. And I've had to fix those things. It's not just always about JavaScript, after the page loads to those technically minded. That's not going to fix it. Just putting arias everywhere does not fix it. Yeah, I wouldn't, I said I worry, but I kind of am. I'm worried about the smaller business. So it's not just for money that I'm doing this because it's my business, but it's also because I do care. And there's just, it seems, is it regulated? I don't think it is. In
And
terms
what
of like, why are overlays okay? I mean, why are people allowed to sell those in the way that they are selling them?
Well, I think the stopping point is where they are deceptive. But the problem is they have there's again it comes back to people just don't understand. This is not the same as like a car. With a car, people generally understand how it should work and what they should get in return. With accessibility, people are relying upon these supposed experts and these companies that have created a magical product, so they say. They're relying upon that, and they don't think that they are outright being lied to. That's just not something they're considering. It's like, why would this salesperson just straight up lie to me for 30 minutes straight? But it happens. And so I think that's how they've gotten away with this. And it is you mentioned the opportunity. Yeah, the part of the good thing about all of these people lying and deceiving on what is actually providing value is that it opens the door for people who do have value. And I think that it may be difficult for some of the legacy, we'll call them liars, the legacy liars. I think it will be difficult for them later, maybe in the years coming, when people realize what they were sold, when people realize what was going on. I think that will be more difficult for them. And I'm imagining that the margins on widgets are decreasing just because it's getting harder and harder to sell them because people, this is information. More and more people are finding out. And so I do think it's becoming harder to sell the widgets. But of course, there are still people that just go rely upon those promises. So I think the answer to your question is they're allowed to get away with it because it's like they're offering a product, right? And like maybe in and of itself, if you want to have a widget on your website, okay, you can have there's nothing that says you can't have a widget on your website. The problem is when the sellers tell you that the widget will do X. Let's say X is stop a lawsuit or X is make your website WCAG conformant, then there's a problem.
Yeah, to me, that's super deceptive. And the people that may be selling them may not realize that they're being deceptive. I mean, they're being told this material, they're given this material.
Oh,
So,
they know at this point.
oh, do they? Okay.
It's too late. It's too late. Overlay fact sheet, overlay false claims.
Benefit of the doubt.
It's too late at this point. So how are you using AI right now? How does it help you?
Oh, I use it every single day. I call mine Atlas, if that makes a difference. Not really, but I use it actually, as far as accessibility, it is a diagnostic helper. So if I see like a component on a site, say it's a WordPress site, and it's just full of code, I may ask it, I may copy it, paste it in, and just say, strip away all the extras. I just want to see what is going on here. That's one way I use it. Another way I use it is I may not I may have written a piece of code and I'm like, okay, I don't see what I missed. Please point it out. And I still can't see it. It's like blindness. It'll point something out. But as far as like asking it to build me something that is semantically correct, like an accordion or anything of these things any kinds of things like that, I don't trust it at all. I mean, I trust it. I do trust it a little bit, but I have to guide it. So you have to know what to ask it. So I don't like just copy and paste because the important thing, as far as I'm concerned, is the context. And that's a big deal for me. It's not just and even so, the AI may miss a lot. So I will correct him like, no, 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 that's not what I asked for. And what about this and that? So you have to know what you're asking. And you have to know how to correct it, and you don't want to use it just straight out of the box, I think. And like I said, context. How does this component play on the rest of the page? Does it come from somewhere else? How you're led there. There's a lot of things going on that AI is not going to catch. And AI makes a lot of mistakes with code. That's what I've discovered. So whoever's going to be using it, just use it carefully and learn the way to code that correctly before you start using it. Or maybe it can teach you a little, but don't rely on it.
Which LLMs do you use?
Right now, I'm just using ChatGPT. It's pretty easy. Um, I was going to use with VS Code and just bring some in, but I haven't really had to do that yet. So that's enough for me.
This is a common theme. I always like to ask about AI because I'm just interested into what other people are seeing with it. And if you're worried about AI replacing us, AI right now it's not showing the ability to replace. Right now it's showing the ability to what, as you described, is like make us more efficient if you know what you're doing. Because if you don't know, like if you can't look at AI's answer and determine whether AI is giving you back an incorrect answer, it can lead you far, far astray. So right now, in terms of accessibility, as much as you would think that I would think I'm always surprised that it's not more. It has so many errors with its fundamental logic, and it's like that was what I would think AI would thrive in, but it's still just so error prone. And then also the other big part of this is omissions, just not catching stuff. So as far as accessibility right now, even using the best models of the best LLMs, I'm not seeing replacement. What I'm seeing is efficiency for those who know how to use it. And so if you're a client wondering how AI can help you with accessibility, it's likely in the fact that it's going to reduce costs because it increase efficiencies on the part of the service provider. But it's not a matter of, oh, I'm going to use ChatGPT today and it's going to audit my website. Still not even remotely close. Like not even, we're not
Yeah.
even, it's, it's not there. It's not there.
No, and also I mean that's super important what you just said. So people don't be afraid. But the other thing too is I think what it's good at is if you're working in accessibility is breaking down an idea with a good analogy. I like to speak in analogies. People understand that better. So helping me organize my thoughts sometimes, especially with accessibility. How can I say this in a way that they're going to understand? These are the blocks that we have. That helps me a lot. So,
For accessibility professionals that have considered starting their own business and or just opening themselves up to contract work and working on the side of employment, what characteristics, what traits do you think would make an accessibility professional um, would help an accessibility professional in opening up their own business?
well, it just depends on what they want to concentrate on. For development, you have to be attention to detail for doing audits. I think attention to detail. Any other person to be able to speak on it, to be able to deal with sometimes there's an arrogant response from people, and to understand how to move that conversation. Um, I think if you're a designer, a developer, or let's say you're into marketing, I'm not sure. I don't know how to relate necessarily because I don't have that in me, but in terms of like bridging that with accessibility, but to be able to speak on the, just learn about accessibility, join the groups, follow some pros, take a high level course. What does that mean? What does it feel like to go to a website and not use a keyboard? Go like this and start using the screen reader. Like, like don't use everything that people are very monofocused. And I think the biggest thing is that was what blew me away when I started doing accessibility was like, wow, I thought I was open-minded. I thought that I was flexible. I'm not. I'm actually super monofocused. I code in a specific way. Every coder does. I have my certain ways of doing things and approaching and I had to break that apart. So I think being super flexible is really important. And if you're going to start an accessibility business, just learn how to speak on these things. Learn how to express concepts without making the other people's eyes glaze over. Keep it into nice little chunks of understanding. There is the fear of getting sued. That is a terrible motivator, but I hate doing that, but that's true. But mostly it's you can detect if a person actually cares about being more inclusive. So you want to have that sense, I think, who you're speaking with. What is it that they're really interested in? If they're doing something that they want to include people and just go, yeah, I mean, this is something that could really help with that. Did you know, blah, 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 blah. And they'll be like, oh my God, I didn't know. If there's somebody that is losing, you look at their stats and they're losing people in their cart. They're not checking out. Could be a lot of things, but they're probably losing on a lot of customers who are getting frustrated. I know that some people will if they have a will, they're going to find a way. But I think exposing to them how difficult it can be just to have more people buying your stuff. How difficult, actually, that's not the point. How difficult it can be for people coming to your site. The human aspect is important. But the financial may be the one that motivates them. Suing,
And
risk.
when you were describing going to a website and you said using, I think you said using a computer like this, you held up your hand over your eyes, and I'm adding that in because that's my audio description. But yeah, I think if you're starting your own business, then attention to detail, that's just it always comes up. You can't get around attention to detail. Be meticulous, be thorough, um, and there's no, it doesn't have to be one right way. And I think sometimes when you see the mainstream marketing advice, which sometimes I think is horrible, there isn't like a one right way to do this. It's just the way that you're successful with. I think some of the marketing advice that has come up and has been accepted, it's I think it's viewed as correct, like they're viewed as the correct approach, but like practically as someone who is receiving the marketing tactics, I think it's exactly wrong. And I'll give you the example of a pop-up. A pop-up coming up while I'm reading a blog post does not make me want to subscribe to anything. Um, and the same with the emails. Like if I do if I am subscribed to something, don't send me an email every week or every 2 days. That's not effective. And so, but that's how marketing, I think, has come from really a few internet marketers, and they had their ideas and notions. And while some can be effective in some rights, I think some of the pervasive marketing views are absolutely wrong. And I think there's bad marketing out there, even if it works, right? You always have
Yeah.
to ask yourself, is it working in spite of itself, or is it working because of what you're doing? And I think some of that's just me on the side on marketing, but um, for traits and characteristics, I would recommend. I think a lot of people would be better entrepreneurs than they think. I think it's the risk component of why they stay away from it. But once you get beyond that, it's actually better than, in my view, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm hard-coded entrepreneur. But I think if more people tried it, at least just as a side, as a side, maybe not even a side business, but just like side contracting, I think they might like it if they gave it a try.
Yeah, you're helping people too. I like that a lot. Be careful about making promises though. Don't promise 100%, not possible. Don't take on anything that has to do with legal stuff. Is my thing. I've emailed you a couple times. I'm like, I don't want to touch that. I don't
When
want
you
to lead people astray.
when you say 100% is not possible, what are you saying?
But what I'm saying is, you could have various audits that come up with this percentage, and they could be testing different things. Scans, for example, what are they testing? WCAG change. That's an ever-changing landscape. Things are changing all the time. Someone may actually. I mean, you could theoretically go like with that one client. I did make it go to 100% for him, but I just knew as soon as somebody started editing that site, it's down to 70.
But when you
Possible, I think.
when you say 100%, are you saying 100% of a scan?
100% of the things that they have tested in the scan, and if there are things that don't follow the rules of that scan, then they are part of that percentage. Um, I don't know if that makes any sense. And it's not necessarily uh, that's the only issue, or that they haven't tested anything else on the site. I mean, the whole site cannot be 100%, in my opinion.
100% of
Is
what?
that wrong? 100%. Have you seen those scans that say 100%? Like you're 100% compliant? It's based on 100% of the things that they are testing.
I think there are two different things in play because when we talk about 100% and we talk about the idea of perfection, there's one, full conformance, and then there is two, there are scans with percentage score. Now, you can get a 100% percentage score, but it doesn't mean that your asset is fully accessible. But when it comes to full conformance, it's possible, difficult in some cases, yes, but possible, yes, because we just have to work through each issue until we've resolved them all for the scope.
Right, for the scope.
Well, I mean, you can continue on that, especially if the scope is limited. Like, so sometimes a website might be consist of 10, 15 pages. Okay, then let's go through those 10, 15 pages. And if not, then otherwise, like a lot of the issues apply site wide. So if we're using the same templates, then it's just a matter of the content. So I'm not saying that it's easy because especially when you have a large volume of pages and URLs, then to go through all of those and know for certain that there are no issues, you'd have to know for certain all of that content at scale. But in theory, like there is 100% available. And especially when it comes to websites and other assets with limited pages or screens, let's take a mobile app. Let's say the mobile app has 15 screens. We can be certain of those 15 screens. So
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, 100. Yeah, I agree with that. I think I'm sorry. I'm talking about like I interrupted you. Go ahead.
no, no,
Jump.
no, what were you saying?
I'm talking about what, in my experience, I remember there was such a focus on it's at 79, it's at 79 or 60. We need to be at 100. And I remember that we would say it's if it ever does get to 100 of the issues that we've tested that were not fixed, it may not stay at that place. So
Right.
I think that they felt, they meaning the client, felt, well, phew, we made it to 100. We're safe. So to me, that's not possible to be safe for a percentage. Yes, that's a moment in time, let's say, but I don't know, maybe I have it wrong. I just will never say that you can be 100%. Of the issues that you've tested, and if I'm doing an audit, then I will, drop those issues and test them all and go, okay, look, you have 100 things going on here. I've tested everything. We've got a third party tester. It's 100% fixed for those issues, but it can change really quickly. Somebody makes an edit. If it's somebody else who's running like a scan and they say you're at 100%, then to me, that's a false sense of security. Oh, hey, I'm 100%. Nothing's wrong with this. Does that make sense? Because I feel like I'm not making any sense.
No, I think it is, but I think there are multiple things that you're looking at once. And so with the scan, yeah, 100% score in a scan is like, it's always best to be, it's a thought, it's a start, right? Like that's where we're
Yeah.
starting. That's great. We want that. We want to strive for 100% on a scan, but that doesn't mean anything really. It means that all it means is that we have zero errors that are showing on that scan, but it doesn't mean anything else. But when it comes to 100% otherwise, it's just a matter of is it actually 100%? And that gets into why when I we came up with accessibility tracker, it was based on audit results and not scan results. But let me give you an example. So that client I told you about earlier that didn't have access to his web hosting or his domain name, we rebuilt his website. We built it basically the version of his website that existed. We built the accessible version of that website. That website is 100% conformant. Now, if someone wanted to say maybe there's a usability issue outside of WCAG, okay, but there are only technical standards that we can look to and we can all agree on exist. With 2.188, there are 50 success criteria. Do we meet all 50 success criteria? Yes, we do. That is why I'm saying 100% is possible because it's definitely possible.
Okay, in that regard, I totally agree. Absolutely. Because I have actually coded sites totally by hand and I've made it 100%. There's no issue whatsoever. I get it. I get what you're saying. I know
Yeah,
what you
I
mean.
mean, it's not easy. It's not easy. And you're right. Like if a client, this client, by the way, he's not going to touch it anymore. He doesn't want to. He's just like he's having us wet hosted and he doesn't even have access to it right now. And I don't think he wants it. So it's definitely possible to take it out of conformance. And uh I can imagine where if we have 100 layouts with different content on those layouts, we might not get to them all. So I agree with you that very difficult and with certainty, like you really have to pay attention to that detail, but it is possible. Like it is, and in certain circumstances, it's more easy to be possible than others. Others, it's very, very difficult to know with certainty, especially as you were stating earlier. Well, that's just the scope. Yeah, if the scope is limited, it's only going to be for that scope.
Yeah. Well, spirited discussion.
I'm very technical. I'm very
Yeah,
technical.
I love that. That's really good.
Last question I have is, what is your advice for developers in this space?
I think developers should start paying attention to semantically correct code, first of all. It's really easy. We get fancy. They don't want to use buttons, they use divs. Just try to code that way. Um, Take some courses on, I mean, you might need to, there's advanced developers that don't do that. They do what I just said, divs instead of buttons. So educate yourself. And I think too, if you're part of a company and no one's brought it up, then start talking about it to your team or the project managers and hey, this is a thing. And if you want, you can learn how to audit, but you've already got a lot of work probably coming your way. So start talking about accessibility and coding that way and teaching by example, and maybe even code snippets for your people that you work with. If you're not that kind of a developer, think about like if you're working at an agency that is not an ad agency, but these web agencies, if you're delivering these templated sites, actually, that should be not the developer's job, but the agency owner. Well, maybe the developer should say something to them like these templates are complete. They're shit in terms of the kind of code that they export and the builders. So if you're a developer working with that, maybe start approaching those agency owners to let's maybe revise this very expensive template that you're selling, this WordPress theme to everybody, and let's start, let's start fixing this, making it so that it's more accessible out of the box. I mean, sure, the person who buys it may mess that up, but the thing that you should be delivering is clean code. Focus on the clean code. I've seen a lot of not clean code, and I think that's a really good way to start. Ask questions. Follow the people that if you're a developer, start talking to other developers that do that and ask them about it. And I think it's an extraordinary skill to have, I think. It makes you more valuable, in my opinion. And that's because, in my experience, I was one of the very few developers that even had an idea about it. And so when those auditing projects, those projects where there was an audit came along, they would ask me. And so that way you can separate yourself. And do not just rely on JavaScript. Please learn how to make something that's semantically correct without having to resort to things like arias to fix things that don't need it. Code bloat, you know?
And so one thing I really like about you is that you actually care. And that separates out like that instantly, like if you're trying to evaluate someone to work with for accessibility, to provide accessibility services, it's very easy if someone actually cares because and you can tell by what they're saying if they actually care and you just let them talk, see what they say. And if you actually care, then it makes all of the difference, right? Because then, and I would say also obsessiveness is a part of this and meticulous nature, another part of this. The more you care, the more you want to be, have this right, the better it is. That's always what I look for in contractors is like, but do you actually care? I know we can talk about accessibility. I know like, maybe some things about the technical part, but are you insistent upon being right? Do you really want this to actually be accessible for whoever is using it? And I think that's a really good differentiator on, if anybody's thinking about starting a business, if you do have that obsession, the fact that you care, if you are paying attention to detail, that right there just separates you from everyone else. And so, yeah, so before we stop, one, what services are you offering? Where are you offering them out of? How can people get a hold of you? And do you have any last thoughts or anything else you want to leave people with?
Yeah, I'm still thinking about where to get a hold of me, but it's fractionalaccessibility.com. You can set up an appointment or email me, just even questions from developers. I mean, I don't mind helping people. And the service that I'm offering now that I've changed a bit, is I'm auditing, but I can also remediate or help your developer remediate or guide them in their remediation. So that's basically the service. I was going to say one more thing though about that service is oh yeah, a suggestion for developers. I'm just going to go back for a second. If you're working at a big company and you're part of a development team, I would volunteer or ask if you could, if you're learning about it, and or if you know a little bit about B, try to help people bring in accessibility from the beginning, because most developers know that fixing something that it's already taken 2 months to create is a pain in the butt. It should have been thought of at the user experience level, at the UI level, then at the design level, even copywriting. That is to me what I would advise any developer working in a large group in an enterprise. And I don't know if that's your clientele or your audience, but I wanted to make sure that was stated. And if you're not working for a large company, then try to be the person that can actually speak on these things to help people at the concepting phase, or I've actually referenced some of it. That's actually part of my services right there. It just naturally went into it that I can speak on it, I can help you. I'll run an audit, but I'm really paying attention. And also, you said something about that. I think you said something about having to be right or wanting to be right or want to make it right. Um I agree with that to some extent. The part that I'm not, I don't think I'm always right. And I think that I make mistakes. And so I'm open to it. I don't think that's what you were saying, but I just want to say, don't be so rigid. Don't be so rigid that like, that doesn't matter. Be more open because you're being like this. And it's important to be like this when people want your help.
I completely agree with that. I definitely wasn't saying that you have to be right because it was
Didn't think
more just
so.
it was more just like that you want to be.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I mean, you can watch the first videos of this channel, and you can see that I definitely wasn't my and even still my video quality is bad. If you read through the articles, I make mistakes in the articles I write, and this isn't even getting to accessibility. So I want to like I'm always trying to have everything so that it is just so like and it really helps people with exactly what they want. But I'm mistakes are to be had, right? Like mistakes happen. I think the quality is that you want to be right though. Like you want to get this right, and especially for your clients, and you want to get to the point where it's like I always talk about excellence, not perfection, but excellence, because mistakes are made. They happen. But you want to have someone who does it, like who's making sure as much as possible that they eliminate those that to the greatest extent possible. So that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's what I thought you said, but I just wanted to clarify a little bit about being right, because that gets you in trouble. Not you, but developers can insist. Just a little
Yeah.
bit.
Well, thank you very much for recording this podcast episode with me. This was really good. Like, thank you, and thank you for your expertise, your experience. You have so much expertise in development. I highly recommend that if you are interested in this space, especially in the development side, that you contact Anna. I mean, like not Anna. But the experience part of this, you can't like experience is so valuable, and it's something that I didn't fully recognize the value until I started as I got older. I was like, okay, like there are just things with experience that take you it can help you accelerate your path so much faster if you absorb that experience from someone else. And so, having been in development this long, I think it's really beneficial if someone wants to consult with you. And especially there is definitely a need for that inspector, that home inspector in accessibility, the accessibility quality inspector. there's definitely a need for that on projects. So I will link to Anna's websites in the description. And remember, you can reach her at fractionalaccessibility.com.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Kim, for giving me a little plug. Kim, I called you Kim. Chris, somebody else I know is named Kim. Um, I love that you brought me on here. I feel really honored, and I love your channel. So this is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.